Welcome to the County Compass, Columbia County's guide to news, voices, and perspectives, hosted by County Manager Scott Johnson. This podcast is your behind-the-scenes look at what's happening in county government and across our community. We'll talk about the services, projects, and decisions that make Columbia County a great place to live. We're glad you're here. Thanks for listening to the County Compass. Now, here's Scott Johnson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the County Compass, the podcast that keeps you connected to the people, projects, and progress making Columbia County one of the best places to live, work, and raise a family in Georgia. I'm your host, Scott Johnson, the County Manager here in Columbia County, and today we're going to be talking about something that touches every household and business in our community, the county budget. So it's that time of year. Specifically, we'll walk through fiscal year 2027. That budget that runs from July 1, 2026 through June 30, 2027. And this was actually recently presented to the commissioners in the form of a public hearing where the public had an opportunity to weigh in on the budget and ask any questions. So that was done recently. We're going to take a look at the numbers, what they mean for you, and we're also going to compare ourselves to similar counties across Georgia and tell you why this budget reflects a strong fiscal health and responsible leadership that Columbia County has been known for some time. As always, I'm going to keep it straightforward, and we'll tell you exactly where you can go to see the full documents. So let's get started. Let's talk budgets. Let's talk Columbia County by the numbers. First, a quick reminder of how we got here. So every year, the staff in Columbia County is responsible for putting together a budget. Ultimately, the county manager by code is responsible for presenting a balanced budget to the Board of Commissioners. So we start that process typically in January, mid to late January, and it's a process that takes us about 5 or 6 months because we have to balance every budget, not just the general fund budget, but we have to take a look at all the budgets in Columbia County. Although today I'm going to really be talking about the general fund and kind of describing what that is. But we're going to talk about how we get there and how we do it as well. But this is something we do every single year where we put everything together, and it starts at the department level, and we work with all of our elected officials, and then they presented a budget to me. And then I put together a balanced budget that funds all the services you rely on. So again, we'll be talking mostly general fund on this episode, so public safety, roads and bridges, recreation, libraries, planning and zoning, parks and recreation, emergency management, all the behind-the-scenes things that really keep Columbia County running smoothly. So let's talk about the big picture for 2027 first. And, I know budget and taxes are always a big deal. Anytime you're talking about government, that's something that people are really concerned about because you, the taxpayer, you, the people that live in this community, you're actually funding this government. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're providing you the highest level of service that we can for the least amount of money. And sometimes that's a really tough balance to strike, but we do our best to do that. I will say that we did present an all-funds balanced budget to the Board of Commissioners this year in the amount of $292,382,310. That is a 7.32% increase in overall budget. So before you think, whoa, wait a minute, now 7% increase, that's a huge, does that mean my taxes are going to go up 7%? No, one really doesn't have it has something to do with the other, but they're not directly correlated. And no, that's not necessarily the case. Basically what we're looking at here when we say all funds, we are looking at all the enterprise funds. So while the general fund is funded by property tax dollars, things like the water utility and the broadband utility and the stormwater utility fund and 911 fund, and there are several other funds out there that are not funded by property tax dollars. So we're going to separate those and talk about that. But when we put it all together, because we have to balance every budget, we put it all together, we're looking at about a little over a 7% increase in everything. Now, I will say that the enterprise funds, we kind of back into those. So we do that budget just a little bit different. We have to look at the enterprise funds to say, okay, how much money do we think they're going to generate next year? And based on that estimate, we then create a spending budget based on that because the enterprise funds also have to be balanced, but it's 100% based on what we think the revenue is going to be. On the general fund side, it's different. We do zero-based budgeting, which I'll describe here in just a minute, and I'm very glad to report that the general fund this year is only growing at 1.95%. So less than 2% more than what it was last year. Last year was a little over 103 million. This year we're proposing $105,925,401 in the general fund budget. So 1.95% increase in the general fund budget. While we did have that 7% increase in overall budgets that I mentioned, there were some funds that actually went down. So not everything went up. We do a good job of trying to balance all that out for you. So let's talk general fund. And that's really the one, like I said, that we really think about the most. It's for core county operations. Again, it's balanced. But let's talk about the process. So what is zero-based budgeting? I know you probably heard that term before, and you really may or may not know exactly what zero-based budgeting is. I will say that it's not as easy to do zero-based budgeting as it is some other forms of budgeting. But basically what zero-based budgeting means is that every year you start at zero and you sit down with your staff and they work up a budget from zero, starting with their personnel, and then what do they need, and who do they need to add, and what kind of equipment do they need, and then they work their way up to whatever their budget number is, and that's how they, once they've done that process, then they present that budget to me, and then I will obviously compare it to last year, see how it compares to revenues, and try to balance that with my executive leadership team before we even submit it to the Board of Commissioners. So zero-based budgeting starts at zero and works its way up. Most governments don't do it that way, and most budgets, period, and really any organization, not just governments, don't do it that way. Typically what you see is you take whatever you had last year and you start there and you add to it whatever you need this year. In government, in my opinion, that's not the best way to do this, because there are times when you actually need less money than you needed the year before. Now, when I first started doing this here as the county manager here in Columbia County, I can tell you I got some pushback, because there was a misnomer in government that said, hey, look, if you don't spend it all this year, you may not get it next year. So we really had to change the culture amongst our leadership here to really make them understand that we need to only spend what we need, and we don't need to be wasting money. We used to have a thing, and I don't really think we really had it here in Columbia County, but I've seen it other places, on a fiscal year budget like ours where we run from July 1 to June 30. I've heard it called Christmas in May or Christmas in June. And what that really means is the staff ends up with some extra money at the end of the year, so they go on a spending spree to make sure that they buy everything they can and spend every dollar they can to make sure they don't lose that money for next year. Folks, that's wasteful spending in government, and we don't do that here in Columbia County. As a matter of fact, if we can, we actually cut the budgets off around May, knowing that we're getting ready to go into the next budget cycle. But we had to change that culture a little bit. We had to change the idea and make people understand, look, this year you may come in under budget. Next year you may come in needing a whole lot more than you needed this year. It's all based on the needs, and it's all with zero-based budgeting. We do this at the department level. Now, again, a lot of other agencies don't do that. But what we do is we break it up into division meetings, and each division will prepare a budget book that they'll come in, and they will physically come in with their budget, with what they're asking for. And then every department in that division will sit around a big conference table, and one by one, the department managers will justify their budget to me and the rest of the executive leadership team as to why they need what they need. And right then we'll go through, and typically what I have done historically is, as we go through these things item by item, and you can imagine this is thousands of pages by the time you have all of our divisions and all of our elected officials kind of doing the same process. We'll go through that process, and I'll either approve it by line. I'll either approve it, deny it, or defer it. If it's approved, it means it's going to go in the overall budget, and we'll present that to the Board of Commissioners. If it's denied, obviously, that means it's coming out of the budget. We'll just strike right through it. You're not going to get that this year. I'm not presenting that to the board. They'll never have an opportunity to see that. Or deferred means we like your idea. We understand that you need that this year, but we're going to have to wait on revenue projections to see if it's going to work. So again, working through a very tedious process that is multiple meetings at the staff level that occur, and allowing the staff to justify their needs, and then us putting our input in there, and then we build a budget based on that. And one of the other things that we do is we figure out if there's a way that we could pay for one-time purchases instead of putting it in the budget. And you say, well, why would you do that? Well, we're fortunate and blessed that we have some good capital improvement funds. We've made some very, I would say, smart investments. We have some interest money that the county has been able to gain with a very favorable market. So let's just say hypothetically that somebody needed a piece of equipment and they could really use it now. They don't really need to wait till July or August or September for this piece of equipment. And they put it in their budget. We may pull that out and say, you know what, hey, we're going to pay for that with one-time money. So we're not going to inflate your budget. We're going to pay for that with one-time money. And then that way, you're not just adding to that budget, and then next year you have this really, really high number. We specifically did that this year. The sheriff had some very unique IT requests and radio requests, and it was really for IT and radio security. It was almost $1 million, and the sheriff needed those things, and we knew that. But instead of putting that in the budget, we were able to work through that and figure out different funding sources to be able to move some of that stuff around. And that's one of the ways we keep our budget down because, again, we're talking about relying on property taxes, and we go into every budget with the idea that we want to lower your property taxes if we can. And if we inflate everybody's budget, we're not going to be able to do that. So we go through that trying not to inflate those budgets. No dipping into reserves for operations this year. I don't think we've done that in my tenure as county manager. We've never dipped into reserves. A lot of governments have to do that, but in Columbia County, we don't have to do that. I would prefer to cut spending before we dipped into the reserves. But again, needs are needs. But we're blessed. We've been fiscally responsible for a long time. And I feel like we're in pretty good shape. We do have a contingency goal of 2.5%. I have proposed a 2.51% contingency for this budget. It's the balancing number. And contingency basically is just in case we need something next year that was not budgeted at all. That number is a little over $2.56 million. If you look at 2.5% of the $105 million budget, that's where we come in, about $2.56 million for contingency, and that's there only if we need it. Typically, we will return that money back at the end of the year. We'll put it into fund balance, and then once we exceed our fund balance that we have set by policy, we will actually either use that to continue to roll back taxes, or we'll roll that over into the capital improvements fund for one-time purchases the following year. So again, just like you balance your checkbook or just like you do your budget at home, it's much the same way. It's just really big numbers and a lot of work and really making sure we can provide the level of service that our citizens have come to expect. So where does the money come from? Well, property taxes make up about 42 to 44% of our general fund budget. When I took over as county manager, I think it was really closer to about 68%. So we have gotten a lot less reliant on property taxes, which is one of the reasons why we've been able to roll the millage rate back every year. This year will be, I believe, the 10th year out of the past 11 that we've rolled the millage rate back or lowered taxes in Columbia County. We've been able to do that, obviously, because the values have been rising on homes. But a lot of governments, when the values rise, they don't reduce the millage rate. So we have been reducing the millage rate. This year will be 10 out of the last 11 years. The only year we didn't do that was in 2020. I believe it was 2020 was COVID year. And we left it the exact same. We didn't raise taxes, but there was so much uncertainty that we just decided to leave it alone. But we have a track record of lowering your taxes here in Columbia County. So from 68% relying on property taxes now to about 42, 44% this year in our budget. Then we have sales tax. You all know that every time you go to the grocery store, you buy something, you go out, any purchase you make, there is at 1 penny, one of the 8-cent sales tax that we have here in Columbia County goes to what's called LOST. That's the local option sales tax. And in Columbia County, we use the full amount of LOST to roll back property taxes. So that sales tax makes up about 30% of kind of our revenue that we're able to bring in sales tax money. And as that sales tax increases, you can be less reliant on property taxes. Now, I will say, a lot of you know, you've heard, I'll be retiring at the end of the year. But I have been very careful to not get too reliant on sales tax money or fines and forfeitures or some of the other sources that we have, because you need a steady source of income to be able to operate your government. If you don't have that and you're too reliant on sales tax, we hit another recession really, really hard, and then all of a sudden you're going to have to raise property taxes tremendously, which is going to be a burden on our citizens. So we try to multi-year plan and multi-year budget, just kind of keeping those things in mind. So we do get money again from sales tax. We get money from services. We get money from fines, from permits, from investment earnings, and then a few other sources. We're not relying on one single revenue stream, and that diversification is really what helps us stay strong even during those economic shifts that I talked about. So on the spending side, let's talk a little about we talked about the revenues. Let's talk about the expenditures. The largest chunk of our general fund budget really goes to what we call the rule of law. And when I say the rule of law, that is law enforcement operations. So the sheriff's office, our detention center, our courts, district attorney, all the things that keep Columbia County safe. Now, that does not include fire and 911. They have their own funding sources. So they're not included in that piece that I'm talking about. They're not even in the general fund. They have their own funds. The fire fund and the 911 fund specifically have their own funds. 911 is actually funded by fees or tax that you pay on your cell phone bill or phone bill, period. That comes back to us in the form of some 911 fees. And then the fire department actually has its own millage rate. So cool thing about the fire department having its own millage rate is we only level the amount of property tax we need to provide fire service in the unincorporated part of the county. So again, it's not being inflated. It's not being used for something else. You know your money's going to the fire department. That's important because we want to make sure we keep our ISO rating at 1, which is the best you can have. And by keeping that ISO rating at 1, not only are we going to be a safer community, but your insurance rates are going to be cheaper as a result of us keeping that ISO 1. So again, different places, money's coming from different places, but we're getting all the budgets, balanced out to give to the commissioners. And then the general government, and when I say that, that's administration, finance, IT, HR, parks and recreation, roads and bridges, code enforcement, everything that makes our daily lives better in Columbia County, that makes up the rest of the budget. So you can see that the rule of law is about half of it, and then everything else is the other half. So I think people sometimes really don't understand that how much we do on really what I would say a shoestring budget. And I'm going to give you some comparisons here in just a second. In the sake of transparency, I want to tell you that we've added 23 new positions in the general fund this year. That's basically due to our growing demand for services across some key areas. Again, the sheriff's office needs that. Our detention center is getting a new dormitory, so the sheriff needs more guards, more deputies to be able to work in the detention center. Our courthouse, judicial annex here in Columbia County is getting larger. We're adding courtrooms, so we're having to add employees to do that. The sheriff has to add employees to make sure that he provides security for the judges and for the courtrooms over there. So as things grow, then we have to grow with that. Emergency management, y'all all remember our response to Hurricane Helene. So our EMA department is growing by a couple of employees. Roads and bridges needs a few more. We got to cut a lot more grass now. Parks and recreation needs a few more. We've had a record number of kids sign up to play sports in Columbia County, and that's amazing. I think having the kids out there on the field means they're going to be, less of them are going to be in that jail pod that I was talking about earlier when they come up being involved in organized sports and finding good things to do with their time. So we're investing in that. So we have to, as we add parks, we have to add park workers so that we can make sure that we can maintain those to the level that you've all come to expect and that you all demand, really. Capital requests in the general fund, they stayed pretty consistent with last year. And when I say capital requests, that's vehicles, large equipment, that sort of thing. We don't really typically go way one way or the other unless there's some huge expenditure, but we try to pay for those out of SPLOST projects, the special purpose local option sales tax. That's another one of those 1 pennies of the 8 I was talking about earlier. That allows us to do special projects. So if we have a big spend, multi-million-dollar spend, we try not to put that in the general fund budget. We try to make sure that those capital projects are paid for from that, from T-SPLOST, which is the transportation portion of that, or the capital improvements fund that I kind of mentioned earlier that we try to roll money into every year to make sure that we have additional money for capital projects. And again, frankly, we were able to completely self-fund our Hurricane Helene relief efforts based on the fact that we had capital money sitting there. We didn't have to raise your taxes. We didn't have to go back and take out loans. We didn't have to do anything like that. We were able to do that and just put some projects on hold. And then as we've been getting reimbursed, we were able to move back forward with the project. So kind of gives you an idea of kind of how the money's being spent. So let's talk about, we're talking about 23 new employees. Scott, that's a lot of people. You guys are bloating the government. Well, not really. I really am proud of our citizen to employee ratio in Columbia County. And, while the average in Georgia is around 1 employee for every 60 residents in a lot of jurisdictions, that's kind of the average number. We try to do more with less. So after adding the new employees that we're talking about, our ratio is going to be closer to 1 to 115. So almost half the employees, but we strive to give you twice the service delivery. So we're not a bloated government. We don't have a tremendous amount of employees. We're actually very lean for a government our size or serving a community this size. But that citizen to employee ratio, instead of the average of 1 to 60, is 1 to 115. And again, I'll put our delivery up against anybody else. Columbia County employees do it best. And I just want to give a shout out to all of you that may be listening, and thank you for the job you do for our citizens every day. Here's the part that I'm especially proud of, the fact that we can continue to do everything that I just described and still keep your taxes manageable or lower if possible. Because our 25 digest actually grew more than 6%. So when I say growth in the digest, that is reassessments on homes. So those of you that have your property values going up, that's adding new businesses, it's adding just different things. As those go up, we see a growth in our digest. But last year we lowered the millage rate back so much that the growth in the digest was actually eaten up by the amount we rolled it back. So we gave you back more tax money than we were actually taking in for that particular year. And then it rolls over year to year. But we were able to roll our M&O millage rate, that's maintenance and operation millage rate, to 4.36 mils. Now, that really doesn't mean anything to anybody, but I will tell you that that's the lowest that it's been in Columbia County in 36 years. We've continued to lower the millage rate, and we are currently at the lowest millage rate that we've seen in this county in the last 36 years. And even when you add fire, that serves the unincorporated area only, or debt service, or any other components, our total millage rate is still very competitive. And then I just shout out to the school board. They've been lowering their millage rate as well. And again, trying to keep property taxes low. We are planning a rollback this year. We did this budget with a rollback in mind. But our goal is 100% removal of the homestead property tax. We're still waiting on the governor to sign our bill. Still optimistic that he will do that. It's just to be able to give our citizens more money back. You may have heard that we set aside the money that we got. If you watched the previous podcast, we've set aside money that we've got from economic development in a fund now for tax relief. So as soon as we can give that back to the taxpayers, we're going to figure out a way to give that back to the taxpayers just as soon as we have the mechanism available to do that. So bottom line, your county government is delivering more services and growing in population while actually lowering the millage rate or the tax rate. And that is really what we call fiscal discipline in action. Folks, it doesn't happen everywhere, but it's happening here in Columbia County. So let's put it in perspective when kind of comparing Columbia County to some of the other places in Georgia. Places with similar populations, so around 160, 175,000, even though we're a little over that now. I picked Coweta County and Houston County because they are often in the same conversations when we talk about growth in the state. Now, let me say, I know both managers in Coweta County and Houston County. They both do an outstanding job. Those counties are model counties. They are really doing great things in both. One, Coweta being in the metro Atlanta area, Houston being closer to Macon Bibb. Both of them are doing great jobs, but let's just talk about their numbers. Coweta County's fiscal year 2026 budget was $117 million, general fund, so a bit larger than ours. Their M&O millage rate was 4.817, higher than Columbia County, which is, like I said, 4.360. So their spending's a little more per capita, and they're charging a little higher tax rate, but again, providing a very high level of service. Houston County comes in at about $86.8 million in the general fund for last year, but their millage rate is significantly higher. It's coming in around the 8.45, 8.5 millage rate. So I would just say that means even with a smaller operating budget, their residents are having to pay some more property taxes on their assessed value of their homes because of the multiplier or the millage rate. No stab against Houston County. Very, very, very well-run county. They're doing a great job, and I'm sure they're doing everything they can to reduce millage rate too. But as they're growing, they're seeing the stress on service delivery and demands, and they're having to provide those services. So they're doing the best to balance that. So Columbia County kind of sits right in the sweet spot there. Solid funding for services, one of the lowest county millage rates among our peer group, strong fund balance. We're not the biggest spender. We're not the highest tax. We're efficient and we're delivering. And that's really the message that I want everybody to leave with as you listen to this podcast. What about millage rate alone? So Columbia County is definitely in the top tier. So comparatively, Barrow County and Oconee County in Georgia, they have us beat with M&O rates of 4.232 and 4.184 respectively. So I want to publicly applaud both of them for working so hard to be efficient while lowering taxes. Again, I know the leadership in both of those counties have a very good relationship with the chairman in Oconee County and the folks in Barrow County. Again, their commissioners and the manager over there, and Oconee County as well, all doing a great job. So I'm going to publicly applaud you for beating Columbia County with your millage rate. I want to let you know we're coming for you. We're going to try to lower ours lower than yours. And again, we're going to try to get rid of the homestead property tax completely. But I'd be remiss if I didn't point out a few differences. So Barrow's the closest to us in population. They have around 96,000 residents. And they're about 62% unincorporated. So they have a couple of cities in Barrow County, meaning about 38% of their residents receive those city services. Oconee's the closest with unincorporated residents. They have about 86%, but the population there is 50,000 people in Oconee County. They're growing, but it's 45 or 50,000 people. So Columbia County is about 80 to 85% unincorporated, depending on who you're listening to or who you ask the question. But we have about 170,000 residents requiring services. We do have, again, the other piece of that, the 15 to 20% incorporated, are our citizens in Harlem and Grovetown, and those two cities are doing a good job of providing services. But again, we have to provide services to the entire county, even the people that live in the city. So, it's, if you think about that, that's almost 80% more. Our 170,000 residents are about 80% more than Barrow County and 375% more than Oconee County. And when we look at the millage rate, we're only talking about less than a quarter mil of difference in the millage rate. Again, we're comparing ourselves to very, 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 very well-run counties, but I want to just let you know where Columbia County stacks up, and it is our desire to be the absolute best. Speaking of comparisons, most well-run counties in Georgia, I would say, are probably in the 6 to 9 millage rate. But there are many in the double digits, and I'm not saying it makes them a bad county. Every county has to do what they need to do to meet the service delivery demands of their residents. Why does this matter to you? Because low taxes paired with high-quality services is what keeps Columbia County one of the most desirable places to live in this state. Businesses look at our numbers too. They want to come where there are competitive taxes and excellent infrastructure, where the government plans ahead instead of reacting. And we're doing that. We're continuing to invest in Columbia County in every way, shape, and form that we can. So that's really it by the numbers as far as the budget is concerned. As promised, here's how we end our episodes. The most ridiculous thing I've heard lately. And this has to do with budgets, and I just actually heard this one very recently. This is a good one. I got a call from a friend asking about reinspection fees for builders. And I'll tell you what that is. So it was reported, though, that Columbia County is charging builders over $8 million a year in reinspection fees. And, of course, this gets social media all riled up, and people are commenting, $8 million in reinspection fees, and what are they doing with all that money, and why are my taxes so high? And that's why I can't afford a house, because the builders are having to pay all these fees to Columbia County. Well, it's made it unaffordable. Well, first let's understand the fee and the process. So when you get a permit to build in Columbia County, your inspections are part of that permit. So the first two inspections you get on a particular item, right? Let's say it's an electrical inspection. The first two are free. If you pass the first, it's not free, it's part of your permit. If you pass one of the first two, you don't pay a reinspection fee. If you fail, and when I say fail, that means that there was an item that the inspector said that you should have done on one of those first two that you still haven't done, and the builder's called us back for a third inspection, then it's a $50 reinspection fee for going out on the third time for the same issue once we've been called to come out there, okay? So that's the way that works. Now, we work with our builders, and they do a good job of building safe homes and ensuring that everything meets the code. This is not a money-making proposition. We don't want to charge a reinspection fee. They don't want to pay us a reinspection fee. But I just want to let you know that the allegation was, or the ridiculous statement that I heard, was that Columbia County is getting $8 million a year in reinspection fees. Folks, absolutely ridiculous. First of all, the entire building standards fund is just a little over $3 million, and that's all of their revenue. I went back and looked to see what the real number was, and last year the real number on reinspection fees in Columbia County was $133,525, and it's actually slated this year to come in under that. So this year we actually reduced the estimate to $130,334 is the revenue number we put in this year's budget based on actuals. We think it'll come in around $130,000, but it sure ain't $8 million. Absolutely ridiculous. Folks, you just can't make some of this stuff up. And I'm going to leave it there. But if you see something on Facebook, just reach out, call us, ask, or not just Facebook, any social media, you hear it somewhere else, come to the source and ask the information. Let us tell you, come to the budget hearing. You can ask questions and be part of our process. We would encourage you to do that. So again, I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the County Compass. If you have any questions about anything you've heard here today or county related, you can go to columbiacountyga.gov. Reach out through the normal channels. I did mention if you want to take a look at our budget, you can look online. We have that posted for you. So you can actually go online, look at the budget, everything we have presented. It has not been adopted yet. The Board of Commissioners will still have to take final action on that, which we'll do in late May, early June. We have to go through the advertising process now, so we're in that phase now where we're going to advertise the budget again publicly after the public hearing. So be part of the process. If you have questions, look it up. If you don't understand it, give us a call. We'll be glad to help you. So that wraps up this episode of County Compass. If you enjoyed it, make sure you subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube. Make sure you follow us on YouTube. It's vitally important because that's where we post all of our information. Leave us a review. More importantly, thank you for tuning in and being an engaged part of Columbia County and our community. Your input and participation is what makes our county stronger, safe. So I ask you to stay involved and keep loving this county as much as I do. Take care.
This has been the County Compass, Columbia County's guide to news, voices, and perspectives. Thank you for listening. We appreciate you taking the time to stay informed about the issues, initiatives, and people impacting our community. And we sincerely hope today's conversation helps you better understand the work being done in Columbia County. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. As always, visit Columbia County's official website or social media channels for additional information. And until next time, thanks for tuning in.